Hello, and thank you for joining us today through video for this worship service. It's my privilege to go ahead and be able to share with you, even though it's been very cold outside and we're not able to have in-person service today. But I still want to share a message with you about Jesus as he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. We've been walking through the week that Jesus experienced leading up to his death on the cross. And so we're going to look at another part of that today. As we do, I want you to think, what would you do if you were about to experience the worst death in all of human history? Jesus was going to do that. And one of the things he chose to do was spend time with his disciples in what we call the Last Supper. They ate together and he was able to teach with them and share with them and show them what serving looked like. Also, Judas was there. And he reached out to Judas, offered him a piece of bread, which is a way of saying, Judas, I want to honor you. I love you. I want you to be my friend. Judas took that bread and he ate it, but it didn't change his heart. And Jesus said, go and do what you're going to do quickly. And he left. And Jesus continued to talk to the other disciples and try and teach them, but he knew that they weren't understanding the significance of this evening and all that he was trying to tell them. Later they would, but not at that moment. So even though he was surrounded by them, in a way, Jesus was all alone in what he was facing. So he took the disciples and they went to the Garden of Gethsemane. And he would spend some time there praying to God the Father. You know, we could say that the two greatest battles in all of human history were fought in gardens. The first one in the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were tempted, and they made the decision to follow their own desires, their own will, instead of God the Father, who had told them not to eat from the one tree, yet they ate from it. And now, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus faces a battle. Will he do what his human desire wants him to do, or will he do his Father's will? Thankfully, he chooses his Father's will. And that's what we're going to talk about today and to learn from that. You know, from Adam's decision in the Garden of Eden, every person related to him, all of humans, has been affected by that decision of sin. And we live in a sinful world. All those who are related to Jesus are affected by his decision in the garden also. Those who become God's child through faith get to be the beneficiary of his decision in the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's read in Matthew chapter 26. I'm going to read starting in verse 36. It tells us this. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. When he came back, he went away a second time and prayed, my Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Also want to read from the book of Luke, as he describes part of what happened there and tells us some of the agony that Jesus was experiencing. In Luke 22 and verse 39, it says, Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, pray that you will not fall into temptation. He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. This garden that Jesus went to, it probably belonged to a follower of Jesus, a friend. It was an area with lots of olive trees and somewhere that Jesus would usually go. And this night, the 11 disciples go with him, and 8 of them probably stay close to the entrance. 3 of them, Peter, James, and John, go on further with him. And Jesus wants them to do that. He allows these 3 to see his anguish that he's going through. And I think that's interesting for us to see that in this time of difficulty, in this time of trouble for Jesus, he wanted his friends close to him. You know, what do we typically do when we have trouble in life? A lot of times we withdraw from others. We push people away and we try and handle it all on our own. Here is Jesus, the Son of God, and what does he do? He brings them close to him. Now, they don't do a great job, but he still brings them close to him. And it tells us what he was going through. It says he was deeply grieved. He was in distress and agony, extremely sorrowful, even to the point of death. These words suggest that he was so overwhelmed by everything that his emotions couldn't take any more, that like his body was going into shock. The thought of dying on the cross, or even worse, the thought of taking on all of our sin upon himself, upon his perfect, holy self, that alone almost killed him right there in the garden. He had to make an agonizing decision, and so he prays. He spends some time with God the Father, and he prays, and he has some of his disciples there, and he wants them to pray. He goes back to them, and they're of no help. They go to sleep. Peter, who had said he would not deny Jesus, can't even stay awake for Jesus. So Jesus, again, prays. And it tells us what he was praying. He says, God, if it is possible, meaning if it's morally possible, if it's any way consistent with your nature, that there be some other way to redeem the people, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. He looked into this cup of God's wrath, and he saw all that it meant to take on sin, to experience the worst of the worst. And he said, can this cup pass from me? Is there any other alternative? If there was another way, don't you think God the Father would have said yes at that moment and offered another way? But there wasn't. Jesus had to die for us. There was no other way. With the disciples falling asleep, Jesus was all alone in this. Sometimes even our friends fail us. Not that they're wanting to or trying to. They're human. And in their human mistakes, they fail us. Jesus returned to his time of prayer. And what we see is he kept going to God over and over. He kept returning to this prayer time. And we see how persistent he was in prayer. If Jesus Christ himself was persistent in prayer, how much more should we be going to God and calling on him? For Jesus, his whole being cringed at the thought of going to the cross and taking on our sin. And he struggled with this. And he said, if there's any other way, but then he also said this, not my will, but yours be done. He said, God, I want to do what is needed. Not my will, but yours be done. How important is God's will in your life? God, I want to do your will instead of what I want. I want to make sure I'm doing your will. It tells us after this that an angel came and ministered to Jesus, strengthened him. The tension in him was so great that it had taken a physical toll on his body. She said he sweat like drops of blood. There's a condition called hematidrosis where you sweat blood. It's when you are under such extreme pressure that your blood vessels expand and then they burst into your sweat glands and blood comes out. You sweat blood. Very few people have ever done this, but it is a real thing. It can occur. And I think that's what Jesus experienced. And he was actually sweating blood. Imagine the pressure on him to take on our sin, to experience what we so easily throw around as a word, hell. He was going to experience what it meant to really experience hell, sin, and apart from God the Father, to be separated from him in a moment, in just a second. And it agonized him so much. Imagine in your life getting a call and somebody says, I've kidnapped your loved one, your child, your spouse, somebody else you love. I've kidnapped them and I'm going to kill them unless you do such and such. Imagine the agony that you would begin to feel in those moments. Now multiply that 1,000,000 times over. And we begin to get an idea of the agony that Jesus was experiencing in the garden as he was preparing for going to the cross and taking on your sin and my sin. I think no person in human history has ever struggled like Jesus did in those moments, because he was facing the greatest thing that anyone has ever faced. He had anguish and stress and sorrow. Sometimes we think, well, does Jesus know what life is like and how hard it can be? Oh, he experienced the hardest thing ever. The Bible tells us in Hebrews 4:15 that we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way and understands what we go through. He's just like us, and that he's experienced life and knows that. And can't you imagine Satan himself coming to Jesus and saying, oh, Jesus, don't go to the cross. There's another way around this. Offering different ways. I mean, he had already done that previously in the wilderness one time. Satan tried to tempt him. And I'm sure he was there again, tempting Jesus, showing him there's a different way. But Jesus prays to God the Father. And he says, not my will, but yours be done. At some point in his time of prayer, Jesus made a final decision and said, I am going to do the Father's will. I will go to the cross. He would go through the most painful thing ever. Now, why would he do that? Well, first, because he was going to please the Father. He and the Father were one, and he wanted to do his will. But also, the Bible gives us some additional insight. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, it says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For the joy set before him. What was that? One was the joy of doing what the Father desired, but also, I think, the joy of what he saw ahead. See, when Jesus was in the garden, I think about the things that he saw. One, he saw the sin. He saw what he was going to take upon himself and all that meant, and that caused so much anguish and sorrow in his body that he sweat blood. Sin is no small thing to Jesus. He looked at the face of sin and he saw the consequences of it. But then I also think that Jesus looked and he saw you and me and others, and he saw what could happen in our lives if he went to the cross and died for us, that we could have a life that had been changed, that we could have our sin forgiven, we could be in relationship with God the Father, we could have a different kind of life and a different kind of eternity. And for the joy set before him, it says Jesus endured the cross. He said, I'm going to go and I will sacrifice myself for them. Jesus thought you were worth suffering for, that he would do that for you. His love for you motivated him, and he went to the cross and died for you. Now, he chose you in the garden. What will you choose today? Will you choose him? He said you were worth it. Is Jesus worth it to you to follow him? And one of the biggest decisions you ever make in life is, will you follow Jesus Christ? And I encourage you, if you haven't, why not today? Why not today say, Jesus, I'm ready to follow you. I'm ready to give you my life. I want to live for you. You died for me. Please forgive me and change my life. And if you have made that decision, are you living for him today? Will you make a decision right now? Maybe you're facing something difficult and you got to make a decision. Will you do the Father's will? Will you follow him? He made a decision for you. Will you make a decision for him today? And you think about him in the garden. And he's thinking about you. And he says, I will go to the cross for that person. Don't you want to thank him for that? And live a life that honors him?